So we do very little for blatant podcast promotion when the episode drops. But around that, we may take guest quotes or other tips that either I know or we learn through conversations and then just build that in through the social post. So at the bottom, we may say, oh, we'll check out episode 65 if you want to learn more. But that's not the purpose of the post. The purpose of the post is to inform and educate the community.
Hey, my Feel Good friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I have a very special human to share with you today. His name is Richard, and he is actually the host of the Inspire to Run podcast, which is this super cool podcast where he brings on lots of people to share tips and just their inspiring stories when it comes to getting off the couch and starting to run and move your body and hitting goals and all that jazz. So if you are interested in running, heck yes, this is an awesome episode for you. But also, we chat a lot about just podcasting in general. Richard actually has a background for 20 plus years in marketing, which is amazing. And so we chat about how you can start your own podcast and how to market your podcast and come up with content ideas when it comes to podcasting and all that jazz. It's such a great conversation. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Hey friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for coming on the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm so excited to bring you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kinsey.
Of course. Well, I did already introduce you just a little bit in the intro, but I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you serve?
Yeah, for sure. So it's really exciting to be here. And just a little bit about who I am. I consider myself a marketer, a runner, a father, husband, really great career in marketing. Started 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. Really focused in the business to business space for large industrial type companies. And, the people that we serve in a lot of ways throughout my entire career, I've been in a fortunate position to be able to help people. So in my first, I would say, industry, we were in the building systems or life safety industry. And over the last few years, I've been in the healthcare industry. So helping people just in a different way, but really great career, I say, over the last 20 years, serving folks in those industries.
Yeah, and that is so interesting. Like, we don't really hear from a lot of B2B marketers on this podcast, if I'm honest. So I can't wait to share a little bit about that. Have there been any big major lessons that you've learned in your 20 years doing marketing that you want to share with people?
Oh, wow. Big learnings.
That's a big question.
That is a big question. I'd say one of the biggest learnings being in strategic marketing, product management and being involved in new product development is your focus really needs to be on the customer. And as cliche as it sounds, I've been a part of projects where internally we make decisions based on our internal capabilities or based on other internal factors. But at the end of the day, the customer is going to spend their dollars if you're solving their problem in the way that they expect or in a meaningful way that helps them. So I've been part of product development projects. We've rolled out or launched solutions. And of course, that feedback comes back in areas where we made decisions to prioritize our own internal factors versus, maybe sometimes the customer needs in those cases. So those are definitely one of the biggest learnings that I've had, throughout my marketing career from a strategic marketing and product development standpoint.
Yeah, yes. And I love that. And I love that that's something so tangible that literally can be applied no matter what type of business you have or where you're at in your marketing journey. That truly is what it all comes down to, is listening to your customers, speaking to your customers. Dude, that's a big one that I deal with in my side of the world is who are you speaking to? And how can you communicate? How can you give them what they're looking for, right? That they're willing to spend their money on. I love that so much. So let's talk a little bit about your transformation journey to starting this like running podcast now. Because guys, we met at Podfest, another Podfest buddy. So that's how I got to know Richard. And now you have this amazing running podcast on the side. Like, what has that journey looked like for you?
For sure. So this one's a little bit of a story. So sit back and relax for this one. So
Love
one
it.
of the one of the definitions outside of the textbook definitions, one of the definitions about marketing that I read a long time ago that I love is marketing is creating, communicating, and delivering value to customers. And throughout my career, I've been really focused around the creating part as well as the delivering, not as much on the communicating, which is what people think about when they think about marketing, right? You think about promotion and advertising, and you think about agencies, but not necessarily some of the other components. So as I progressed in my career, I realized that, or I felt like I was missing something, being on the B2B side, not being on the B2C side. I wanted to get more involved in that part. So I started to learn a lot more about digital, like social media and SEO and websites and things that I've kind of known about over the years, but not in depth. And I went back for a digital marketing certification, which was really, really interesting and informative. And I got to the point in my career was like, I want to do what I'm doing today in B2B marketing, but I also want to further explore and experiment kind of in this B2C and then digital space. So that's kind of where the podcast came from, where I want to do a podcast. I want to be in this space. And my original thought was to do something in marketing. I'm like, no, I do enough of that in my day to day. So what else can I do? And since I'm a runner, I've been running since high school. I took a number of years off. And then just about 4 or 5 years ago, I got back into running as a way to not only just kind of get in shape, but also to overcome fears that I have. A fear of heights and a fear of a lot of things. And running and obstacle course races have helped me in that journey. So come 2 years ago, I said, well, it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I talk about it with friends, family, colleagues. Why don't I just do a podcast about that? And that's kind of how it started. And honestly, the reason why I chose the podcast as a medium is I feel like there's so many people with far more interesting stories than my own from a running standpoint, or probably in general. And this is a platform that allows me to share their story. So that was a little bit of a story as to how I got here and creating and launching a podcast.
Oh my goodness. So many great things in there. I'm just over here grinning, you guys, because I love, love, love hearing like people's backstories and how they got started. And I feel it so much in my soul, like how wonderful it is to chat with people who you never would have had the opportunity to chat with before. And hear their stories, right? And share stories together. Like that is one of my favorite parts about the podcast. Like I love, love, love doing these interviews with people because it's just so fun to chat about things and to find connections over things and to learn the lessons that they've learned too and all that different stuff. It's just so much fun. And I love the angle of like running as well, right? Because it's like one of those things that you're passionate about and you can connect with other people about as well. So you just like started your podcast and like you didn't know what like anything about podcasting really, right? Like how did you learn like what to do? And I was like, because I was the same way, by the way. I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast, then I had to figure it out.
Yeah. And, honestly, the podcast idea wasn't my idea specifically. I actually started with, again, I wanted to get into digital. I was like, let me just start a blog. Let me just start writing, being in marketing, right? So we're naturally creative and writers. So I just wanted to start a blog. And a good friend of mine said, well, why don't you start a podcast? And I had no idea what that was. I was like, I don't even know what that is. I need to do a little bit of research. So when I got to the point of actually doing it, I went through a training program. So I actually took, I'm sure your listeners would know Pat Flynn as one of the popular folks in this space. And I signed up for his training and it absolutely helped me get from A to Z and get the podcast launched. So that's really how I learned. And then since then, I've been listening to podcasts like yours to really understand, how can I make my show better? How do I grow the show? And what are the things that I could do to kind of wrap around the show to give, full experience for my listeners and community?
Yes, yes, yes. I love that so much. Oh my gosh, I have not taken one of Pat Flynn's courses, although I probably should just to give him some money because I feel like I owe him something because he helped me so much too. Just like, yeah, listening to his show. He has a great like free starter guide checklist for a podcast and stuff. But like I send everyone who asks me about podcasts to him as well. So I'm glad you brought him up. But like, yeah, I love the fact that you're like, I'm going to start a blog. And then one of your friends was like, well, why not a podcast? Because literally, podcasting is, I think, one of the best mediums out there, right? When it comes to it is very like blog like in like the way that you share information and stuff, but there are so many fewer podcasts than there are blogs still, although it's a growing industry. But also I love like the longevity of it. I like that people can like listen to it for an hour. It's like the only type of content that people will pay attention to for more than 5 minutes. And so I love it. Like, what have been some of those things that you've learned through starting the podcast journey, I guess? Or have you had any like specific aha moments when it comes to growing your show or promoting it or anything like that? Give us all the deets, Richard.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely been a journey. Even though it's only been about 2+ years, it's been a journey. And, one of the things I would start off with first is, for the listeners, just start. And I know it's a little cliche to say that, but I remember when I started my show, just even recording the trailer in the first episode, I can't tell you how many times I did it, but I wasn't happy with any of them. And then I finally had to say, you know what? I have to start somewhere. So I'm just going to click the publish button, put it out in the world, and just see how it goes. And then you improve over time. So when I go back and listen to my episodes, for sure, you can see and hear the progression from your first 10 episodes to the next 10 to the 10 after that. So the first one, you're like, oh gosh, can we skip to the end a little bit there? But you just have to start. You just have to get out there. And it was really exciting for me, not only for me to share my story, but I think you said it before, is to meet other people who you wouldn't have met before. The joy of hearing them share their stories, because my guests are really wonderful people. They're really down to earth, authentic people, and they're really grateful for the opportunity. Many of my early guests were first time guests on a podcast. And it was really nice to be there, to be that one to offer them the opportunity to share their story and be that first podcast that they get on. So that's been a great journey for me. And then along the way, some of the other things that I've learned is I started the podcast as Inspire Virtual Runs because it was born out of the pandemic. Everything was virtual. Gyms were closed. I started running outdoors a lot more. I even did a 90-day winter running streak just because I needed to get more accustomed to being outdoors. And that was a challenge for myself. So it was really based on virtual races, virtual community, and just a way to kind of keep moving, even though we were going through such a tough time. So that's kind of how it started. But then as things started to improve and as things started to open up again, I realized that we weren't talking as much about virtual races. We're really talking more about inspiring others through my guest stories. So the focus went from Inspire Virtual Runs to Inspire to Run. So I would say about a year into the journey, I decided to rebrand the podcast. I was like, you know what? Now I really know where I want to take this platform and how I can help others through these stories. And I felt like the virtual part may have been a little bit of a barrier. Someone's focused on, well, what does that mean? Do I have to put on these 3D Oculus glasses, or like, what does running virtually mean? So if I could take that barrier away and really just focus on not moving today or not running today to achieving your health and fitness goals through running, that's what I'm looking to do. So that's where we are today as Inspire to Run podcast.
I love that. And oh man, this is hitting home for me because I am currently going through one of those like tiny, shifty, rebrandy things like in my business, right? With Feel Good Social. I kind of started out as like the angle of like social media marketing that feels good and to you, right? Because My audience, like if you're listening, you know this. It's like we all know how soul sucking and time sucking and just like energy sucking social media can be, right? And I was fed up with it. And so I'm like, this is gonna be my angle, right? But however, this podcast is not just about social media marketing. And we're kind of like focusing on the bigger, broader marketing things and branding things and all that stuff. So I feel you with like making those little tweaks in your business and deciding to rebrand. And I'm glad that you shared that as well, because I think that sometimes people are like afraid to question their businesses and like afraid to think about making like shifts and pivots. I think that sometimes they feel like, well, I'm already down this road. So like, we just got to go full force here instead of like questioning, like, is this really working for me? Are there big shifts or even like little small tweaks that actually make more sense for what our business has evolved into, right? Because I think that that's something that's scary for people is like, I just want to have my business, go full force with it, but not realizing that like businesses evolve too over time, just like people. Is that making sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And it doesn't even matter where you are in your journey. Obviously, if you're early on in your journey, then it's probably easier to do that. You probably don't have as strong of a connection or a base to be, I don't know, I would say nervous about walking away from. Maybe would be the right way. But you're absolutely right. No matter where you are in your journey, if your business isn't serving you or your customers in the way that you want, then it's time to consider whether or not it's time to make a change. And then in my case, it was more of a branding thing versus the platform and the conversations. So really what I think I did is I really updated the branding to reflect the conversation, to reflect what we were trying to accomplish. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, I have to make a change. If I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it. And then we could build from there.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that so much. I know. Actually, I did go through a complete brand name change after 1 year in business. My original business name was Native Creative, and I changed and shifted to Feel Good Social and that was when I started the podcast, right? Because I was like, Feel Good Social, like this is just fully embodying like who I am and how I want to show up in the world, right? And now I'm kind of slightly like mulling through, 4 years in now, like, okay, we're not quite leaning into social media marketing as much. It's more all encompassing. Like, what does that look like for my brand and all the different stuff? So did it immediately like click for you as soon as you decided to shift that name? Did you see like more listenership or feel more connection like with your business and or your audience as soon as you kind of made that branding shift?
Yeah, I think it helped me in a number of ways. First, I think it gave me an opportunity to relaunch. And there's a lot of momentum that you get from doing any kind of launch. So that was first. And then it gave me an opportunity to refresh my assets online. So I have a great cover art now versus the first one before. It's definitely an improvement. And just improving some of my other social assets. So for sure, I definitely think it gave me momentum kind of for my community and the listenership, but also gave me a lot of energy to really move further and faster in the work that I'm doing. So I would say yes, definitely.
Yes, yes, yes. The confidence to show up more, right? Like that's what so many people struggle with when it comes to like the branding stuff. I love that so much. Okay, so share with us a little bit about like your own experience with running and like what Inspired to Run like does for its community and like how you like stay involved and all that stuff.
For sure. So my personal running story first. So like I mentioned, I was a runner in high school. I wasn't the fastest runner, but it was a sport that I felt like I could do. And I really enjoyed doing it. And after high school through college, I didn't really run as much. I just ran here and there as part of my workouts. And as just about 5 years ago or so, I signed up for my first obstacle course race with a family friend. And as part of that race, it was really an opportunity for me to overcome fear. So for me, climbing a rope or, monkey bars, or there's just a number of things that I either couldn't do or was afraid to do. So I did the first race. I completed the race, but afterwards, I felt like I could do it so much better. So that's really what kind of restarted my love and joy for running, because obviously you're running in obstacle course races, but you're also challenging yourself in different ways. So that's, I started to share my story with others, as I mentioned, and that was inspiring for me to hear their feedback to the point where folks are asking me, well, when's your next race? Do you have any new pictures to show, right, of my muddy races? And that was really interesting for me. So I've just kind of progressed from there. And from just a pure running standpoint, it also encouraged me to run longer distances. So I went from running a 5K, which is usually my jam. Now I'm running half marathons, which I would never in my life think that I would run a half marathon. And I've run, a few at this point. And the next step in my journey, potentially in 2024, is to run a marathon. All of that has stemmed from kind of reigniting my joy and love for running through obstacle course races. So kind of bringing it to the podcast, what I'm trying to do is share the gift that it's given me in overcoming my fears and helping me with my health and fitness. I want to share that with others, and not only with my story, but also with stories from my guests. So kind of what we focus on in the podcast and Inspired to Run podcast is around 3 pillars: mindset, movement, and motivation. So first, you have to have the right mindset. And that could be just depending on where you are. You may not think you're a runner, or you may not be interested or motivated to run, or maybe you've made the decision, but don't know if you can do it. So we talk a lot about mindset, about what takes people from not running to wanting to run and making that decision to do it. Then we talk about movement. It's, well, how do you actually do it? If you've never run before, what are the resources and tools that can help you, like Couch to 5K programs? If you've run before and you're looking to run longer distances or obstacle course races, what's the next step? What else should you be doing along the way, like strength training or nutrition or gear? So that all is kind of bundled in the movement pillar. And the last one is motivation. And motivation is really important because even if you get started, even if you learn how to run or get to that first 5K, if you don't keep it up, you're not going to get the long-term benefits of doing this work, right? To reach your goals. So motivation is really about, well, how do you stay motivated and consistent to get to your goals, no matter what they are, right? So I'm not going to tell you what those goals are, but I want to help you get there. So motivation is seeing some results and just having the internal motivation to keep going, or being part of a group and having the group motivate you by sharing their stories or cheering you on. So there's a number of things that we talk about that help our guests and our listeners and community with that last pillar. So that's really what it's about, is helping folks through that journey by talking about those 3 pillars.
I love it. I love me some alliteration, firstly. Mindset, movement, motivation. So wonderful. And guys, there's so many good little nuggets that we can take from Richard, like what he just said, not just the inspiration that you're sharing with us about running and how it helped you overcome fears and what that looks like. One of my Feel Good Social Clubbers is a social media manager for endurance races. And she was sharing how she kind of got into doing triathlons, right? And she's like, well, I hated swimming, but it was kind of one of those motivators that helped me to overcome that fear and get into it and want to do better. I love how other aspects of our life can influence everything else. I like making parallels between your hobbies and how they help you stay focused. For me, it's rock climbing, right? I feel like rock climbing has actually helped me to do the scary things in business somewhat, to really just stay focused, because it feels the same in the body, right? Anyway, I love hearing that sort of stuff. And also the pillars. I think that that's something that is so helpful when it comes to content creation. And having cohesiveness and uniformity in your business, not only allowing you to be able to produce content and always understand, okay, I need to hit these 3 pillars, but also for your listeners, I'm sure, and guys, any type of content that you're creating for your business, choosing pillars not only helps you as the content creator, but it also helps your content make sense to your audience. Thanks for sharing that, Richard. I love it.
You're very welcome. And I'm excited about it too. And that's the conversation I have with my guests. I don't necessarily script my shows, but I do mention that we do talk about those 3 pillars: mindset, movement, and motivation. And we try to kind of talk through the story in that way so we can convey those messages and those helpful tips for anyone that's listening, again, depending on where they are in their journey, because they may be at a different place. So maybe the mindset part isn't as interesting for them because they're beyond that. Now they're like, well, I'm committed. I made the decision. I'm committed. Now I need to know how to get moving, right? So that's also part of the conversation. But you're absolutely right. To kind of taking this to a marketing standpoint and digital standpoint, I'm creating resources and lead magnets according to these pillars to help our community along their journey. So that's been super helpful. Like just started to kick off my regular email list. So I'm building an email list now, and that's been a lot of fun, sending out a weekly email, but also building it through these lead magnets. The social content that I have is really based around these three pillars. So every week, you're going to get the same types of content surrounding these messages, but they'll just be different messages. So one week we'll talk about hydration. Another week we'll talk about actual running and movement. Another week we'll talk about foam rolling and stretching and the importance of that. And then baked around that will be that inspiration, right? The inspirational quotes and inspirational stories from guests. So that it feeds into not only the resources, lead magnets, but also into social.
Exactly, guys. Like that's one of those things that a lot of people who especially are just starting out and like marketing their own businesses and creating content and all that stuff. One of the biggest things I run into all the time, what the heck do I post? And it really doesn't have to be that hard when you can think about how you can take these themes and topics and ideas and approach them from different angles. So Richard's, themes are motivation, mindset, and movement. And I'm sure most of your guests share about these three different themes in like different ways. And that's where it all like becomes so inspiring and interesting. It's not the same episode every week. You're also talking about different topics, but you're keeping it within these three pillars. Once you start thinking about your content in how can I like choose a topic and approach it from different ways and think about it from different lenses, like the ideas become endless. They really do. And I love how you take that and you put it onto social media and it all makes sense for your brand, like no matter where you're showing up online.
We do. And it's not only for podcast promotion. So we do very little for, I would say, blatant podcast promotion when the episode drops. But around that, we may take guest quotes or other tips that either I know or we learn through conversations and then just build that in through the social post. So at the bottom, we may say, oh, we'll check out episode 65 if you want to learn more. But that's not the purpose of the post. The purpose of the post is to inform and educate the community. And if you're looking to learn more, obviously you can go to the podcast. So I just want to say that, but I also want to say another thing around what you said around that content creation, because I am part of other podcast groups. And I've seen some folks struggle with that content, whether it's for the podcast or for social. And I'll tell you what, for me, having guest interviews has been the solution. I'm not struggling to find content. There's so much great information that comes out of these conversations. The sky's the limit with what we could do with content and resources. So just wanted to make that point too for your listeners.
Totally. And also like, my solo shows are like my least favorite shows and like the hardest for me to create, right? Because it's so much easier to have a conversation with someone. I light up more when I'm having a conversation with someone, picking their brain about a topic or like just hearing their inspiring story. And it's helpful for your growth when you can like collaborate with others and like spread the joy and spread the love and spread each other's messages. That is really truly like the fast track to growth for most things, I would say, and there's lots of different ways you can collaborate with people. It doesn't have to be a podcast, although totally start a podcast, guys, because they're awesome. But like it can also be, collaborating with Instagram or, live videos or however it wants to be, email list takeovers, or just sharing about other people's businesses in whatever avenue you are like most prominent in. I have really enjoyed our conversation, Richard. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If anyone is like wanting to be inspired to run, what are your resources that you share? Or do you have any like quick tips that you like to share with people who are like wanting to get inspired to run? Because actually that's probably me over here. I like have been meaning to run all winter and I really like have not been doing a good job with that. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll share some tips first, and then I can share how they can find us. So, first off, like I mentioned, it's really about mindset, and it depends on where you are. So some folks may not be in the right headspace to even think about health and fitness or doing something about it. And what I found is typically there's some turning point in their life that makes them or encourages them to make a change, right? Or whether it's family related, whether it's a doctor diagnosis, or there's some trigger that makes them think, you know what, I need to make a change. So from there, typically the next step is, well, what do I do and how do I do it? And for whatever reason, running comes with a strong emotion. If you're not a runner, some folks may think, well, I'm not a runner, I can't do that, with like really strong emotion. So it's really kind of overcoming that and getting to the point where you can start your health and fitness journey and start running. And usually, what I say to people is, number one, you don't have to run fast to be a runner. Whatever pace you go at, you're a runner. You don't have to run necessarily. You could walk and you could run and you could walk and you could run. It's literally called the walk, run, walk method. And you typically find those in those starter programs, like a Couch to 5K program. So I would say is if you made the decision that you wanted to make a change and running is going to be part of your journey, there are programs to help you literally no matter where you are, but just start walking. Get a good pair of running shoes and just start walking. I assure you, over time, you'll get to where you want to be. And then for movement, there's a lot that we could talk about for movement. But again, good pair of running shoes, good program, depending on where you are in your journey. And if you feel like the standard programs aren't for you, because maybe you're a little bit more advanced, then the best next option is a coach, is to get a running coach or a fitness coach. They will certainly help you take you to the next level, again, depending on what your goals are and where you want to be. And then when it comes to motivation, it's really about celebrating and acknowledging your wins, whether they're small or big, just really acknowledging those. And then also being around like-minded people. That's really going to help you in your journey. So that's it. That's kind of my tips for mindset, movement, and motivation. And we have a Kickstart guide. So 5 steps to kickstart your fitness. You can come to Inspired to Run podcast on Instagram, DM us the word Kickstart, and you can sign up for your free guide.
Yes, awesome. Totally going to go snag that after this interview because I need to kickstart my journey again, for sure. But thank you so much for sharing that with us, Richard. It's been so wonderful chatting with you. Can you share once again where people can connect with you on your website or Instagram or whatever that looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So best places on Instagram is Inspired to Run podcast. And then you could find the podcast itself on any platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and it's Inspired to Run podcast.
Perfect. And we will link things in the show notes as per usual, guys. But thank you once again. It was a great conversation.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
How wonderful was Richard, you guys? I hope that you found some awesome little knowledge nuggets, whether it came to his tips about running or marketing or podcasting or any of that. And if you did, I would love it if you would share this episode to your Instagram stories. Make sure that you tag both of us. I'm at Feel Good Social. He is at Inspired to Run podcast, because we would both love to see that, reshare it, and spread the love right back to you. All right. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will catch you next time I catch you. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.